Some years back, we looked at the book of Daniel, and we kind of went through it and looked at the prophecies, things of that nature. But while there's a precise time clock in Daniel, there's something even more that can be extracted. And I doubt that we're going to get through this today. But I want us to look and see what we can deduce out of Daniel relative to who God is. God definitely gives us a clock in Daniel. It's precise, concise, and pointed. And it points specifically to the days of certain kings. And I'm convinced that those kings have already come and gone. Because I look at Daniel, and I look at the 11th chapter in particular. And I know it gets kind of confusing, the king of the north, the king of the south, king of the east and the west, and so on and so forth. But if you take time, and in that time, you're able to put together who the king of the north is, and the south, east, and west. And you follow what's going on there. And you see that in Daniel 11, it all leads and points to the coming of Christ. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will not be destroyed. It's not going to be a physical kingdom. It'll be spiritual. And it will be in the days of those kings. What kings? The kings they're talking about are the ones that started the Roman Empire. Because you can see there, if you look closely at Daniel, the 11th chapter, you can even see the Battle of Actium with Antony and Cleopatra's armament going up against Caesar. It's clearly defined and laid out. I love history. And so I know that sometimes when we look at Daniel, your eyes glaze over, the mouth opens up, and I've lost you. I know it. I know it. I'm a history geek, and I know that I could have never taught high school history because the kids would have been sound asleep. And even when I taught at college, I did not teach history, but the other things I taught. And I realized that people get excited about different things. I get excited about those things about God, those things about history that relate to Him. And so if I kind of geek out a little bit, you'll understand why. But if you do look in Daniel, and you spend even a little bit of time, you come to a way realizing that he's talking about in the days of those kings as being the Romans. Because he talked about time frame, and he talked about, well, in Daniel 2, you, King Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold. And after you will come another, and then another, and another. And it's laid out there. The Medes and the Persians followed. And then following that was Macedonia with Alexander. And the next great empire that came onto the face of the earth was the Roman Empire. Now, a lot of people want to transcend and have it come down to today. They want to have it come down to the European common market. No, it's not what it's talking about. Because Jesus, even in his teaching, talks about something that Daniel talked about. The abomination of desolation. And Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, you'll know. And Jesus said, I did not come to abolish the law or the prophets. I didn't come to abolish, but to fulfill. And not one jot or tittle will be taken away from the law till all is accomplished. So when Jesus came, everything, the law, the prophets were fulfilled, including Daniel. So we really don't need to know about the timetable. I mean, it's good if you're going to be teaching against premillennialism, things of that nature. But that's not what we want to take away this time. What I think we ought to take away is the power and the magnitude of God. Begin to realize some of those things about God that reveal his nature to us and how dramatic it is. So, in a lot of times, and when we look at a Bible book, we look at it just from this standpoint. Here's what it's all about. Flip it over. See it a little bit differently. And that's what we're going to do with Daniel. So go with me, if you would, into Daniel, the 9th chapter and verse 4. And I realize that our overheads are a little bit smaller and might be a little bit more of a challenge. And they are that way for a reason. I'll try and figure out how to do it a little bit differently. But the reason is that we can then run the crawl if we have to do it in Spanish. Run it at the top. So that it's kind of condensed for that reasoning. Anyways, in Daniel 9 and verse 4. And I prayed to the Lord my God and confessed and said, Alas, O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant and his loving kindness for those who love him and keep his commandments. So when Daniel begins talking about God, he says, God is awesome. Awesome. What was it, about 25 years, 30 years ago? That was in the vernacular of the kids, the young people. Oh, dude, man, that's like so awesome. I don't think that probably generates and resonates today. You guys are looking at me like, whoa, what a knobhead. But we know that it was used. We know that awesome got into the vernacular of society. The word awesome, as it's used by Daniel there, extremely impressive or daunting, inspiring, great admiration, apprehension, yes, or fear, veneration, and wonder. That's God. He is awesome. When you think of his power, of his might, it causes one to go down to their knees. Impressive. Overwhelming. Our God is a consuming fire. He is the consummate of all things. And it is awesomeness, you can see on the overhead maybe, impels individuals to want to worship God because of a dualistic reason. His nature, that should be enough. But also his character. And the character that God reveals is more than impressive. He is trustworthy, as we talked about earlier today. He is incapable of lying. He's the embodiment of truth seen in the Son. But go back to the 12th chapter of Hebrews. You can hold your finger there in 9 if you want. But in the 9th chapter, the 12th chapter, verse 28, therefore, since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken, tie that back into what we were talking about this morning, about the kingdom, what Christ did, and so on. Cannot be shaken. Let us show gratitude by which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire. Reverence and awe. I bristle when people find out what I do. And then they want to call me reverend. I am not holy and reverend. I am not deity. I never will be deity. And they go, well, what do we call you? And I go, Bruce. That's what you call me. Even when they find out I have a doctorate, should we call you Dr. Bruce? No. Too much responsibility. No, call me Bruce. My doctor friends and their nurses, they go, well, you really need to call him Dr. So-and-so. I go, why? Does he call me doctor? And they go, you're not a doctor. And I go, yeah, I am. I got a PhD in psychology. Yeah, but you're not that kind of doctor. Give me a break. I'm a doctor. So I explained that to one of my doctors. And then I explained it to another one of my doctors. Now we're on first name basis after 40 years. 35 years, excuse me. But the point is God alone is reverend. He is awesome. He is beyond description. Now we could go back into Deuteronomy, and we could look in the 10th chapter in verse 17, see the same thing being talked about. But for the sake of time, let's just go back to Psalms. And let's go to the 68th Psalm. And in Psalm 68, let's drop down into verse 35, last verse in the Psalm, and appreciate what the psalmist has to say. O God, thou art awesome from thy sanctuary. The God of Israel himself gives strength and power to the people. Blessed be God. So when Daniel is laying out who God is and laying out these prophecies, he's giving us insight into the character of the God of heaven. But we're not done. God is eternal. This is one that just hurts my head. I mean, maybe Ralph can explain this to me. But God is eternal. I'm not eternal. I'm not going to have eternal life. And you go, yeah, you will. No, I won't. Because I had a beginning point. I had a starting point. Because eternal means having, well, infinite duration. Timeless. You're not eternal. You may have life that is everlasting, but eternal life, no. Only deity has eternal life. Only deity has no beginning, has no end. That's eternity. So Daniel writes, and I heard the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, as he raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, half a time. You realize that if you double that up, it's 7, which is the perfect number and a different lesson all in itself. And as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. So, what he's saying there is deity has no beginning, is master over time, because he said, I'm going to do it in time, half a time, or whenever I so declare it, because I have control of time. Do you have control of time? And don't say, yaha, we can turn the clocks back in the fall and forward in the spring. No, that's deception. That's not changing time. Thank you, Gabriel. It's manipulating your mindset. You don't get any hour of time, anything. You got the same 24 hours in a day. So here's the point. God is eternal. You and I are not. And that hurts my brain to try to think about that. Because as a human being, everything has a beginning point, right? I mean, somebody was talking about the building of this building the other day. And they said, whoever built this building did a really good job of it. Joy, I wish your dad was here to have heard that. They said they took so much into the planning. But what they didn't take into the planning was a shutoff for the water. But in every other way, they did everything. Perfect. Planning. This building had a starting point. It had a conception in somebody's mind. But when it came to deity, no starting point. Just has always been and always will be. That hurts my mind. And I accept it by faith. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. If I saw it, then it wouldn't be faith. And so Daniel says, or God says through Daniel, you need to understand I'm eternal. I'm eternal. We were blessed this morning to have a couple who yesterday celebrated their 70th anniversary together. 70 years. And their son, I was talking to him, he's out riding a skateboard. Now, Randy's not our Randy, but a different Randy. Randy Fisher rides skateboards. His son, adult son, rides skateboards. And to look at his father, who's in his 90s, it looks like Mr. Fisher could ride a skateboard. I could learn a lot from them. 70 years of marriage. But they had a starting point. 70 years ago at this time, we got married. Starting point. God has no beginning. God has no end. God is eternal. To me, couple that with awesome, because he is awesome. But he's magnanimous. Easy for me to say this late in the day. Because he is forgiving and compassionate. To forgive. To forgive. To grant mercy. To cease to feel resentment against an offender. Amnesty. I hold no resentment toward you. You may have treated me like a skunk. May have treated me worse than a skunk. But it's okay. You're forgiven. And I hold no animosity toward you whatsoever. Now that's what God is. He's loving. He's compassionate. He is all of those things and more. Let's go back to the book of Lamentations. And in the book of Lamentation, let's go into the 3rd chapter. And you probably haven't been to that book in a long, long time. Let's go to Lamentation 3, verse 22. The Lord's loving kindness indeed never cease. His loving kindnesses never cease. For his compassion never fails. Compassions, plural. His loving kindnesses, plural. They never fail. They never cease. So what that tells me is once God forgives something, it is totally forgiven and it is forgotten. We're talking about Daniel. So let's go into Daniel, into the 9th chapter, and we're going to go down into verse 9. Daniel 9:9. And here's what Daniel writes under the inspiration. Well, actually, this is Daniel's prayer. And Daniel is just opening himself up wide. But in verse 9, to the Lord our God belong compassion and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against him. Now, if we would have found the word sin there, we'd have said, okay, sin, we all sinned. But what about rebelled? What about rebelled? At lunch this afternoon, some of us were talking about back talk. Back talk. How many of us kids back talked? Probably most of us. I know I did. And my father played boxer's bingo with me from time to time. Boxer's bingo, 5 under the eye. Back talk. Rebellion. Did you engage in rebellion? I did. Openly, freely, I was rebellious. And even in the streets, not to the degree that we're seeing now, but I was rebellious in that day and time. But thanks be to God that I was forgiven. That it's all washed away and remembered no more, except by me. And that tells me that I'll never do that again. Did I get away with it? Yes. That doesn't mean it's right. Am I proud of it? Absolutely not. And if someone can learn from my mistakes, then praise be to God. But now you have this awesome being who has no beginning of days nor end of days, who is truly eternal in all ways, who's compassionate, who's caring, and is forgiving. And he's there for us. So look at that word forgive again. To cease to feel resentment against. Do we have people that we have offended? Probably. Do we know of people who have offended us? Yes. Have we forgiven them? And if we have, do we still hold resentment toward them? You can't. You can't. God holds no resentment toward you. Is Daniel done? No, Daniel's not done. As you read through Daniel, the 2nd chapter, verse 45, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. We talked about God being master over time and everything like that. So Nebuchadnezzar was given insight into what was going to take place down the years and in the days of those kings. Yes. You've seen what's going to be, and that's what God's telling you. His greatness. Even the kings of heathen nations recognize the greatness of God. Oh, for Nebuchadnezzar, it took a little bit. It took a little bit. You can see on the overhead, Daniel 6 and verse 20. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? Now, Daniel was not a young man when he was thrown into the lion's den. And you realize that it was all done because of a political arrangement. Daniel was on the other side of the equation of those things politically expedient then. And they trapped him and got the king to say, okay, whoever does X is going to be thrown. And that was Daniel. Daniel would not back down. And he was an old man by the time that happened. God was able to deliver him. Nebuchadnezzar needed his eyes open. Nebuchadnezzar thought he was all of that in a bag of chips, so to speak. But he was relegated out into the field. And he would remain there until he came to his senses. And he eventually had fingernails like eagle talons. His hair had grown to the length of eagle feathers. He had been out there a long, long time. Then he came to his senses. And once he did, he made acknowledgement of who God is, the power of God. Go back into Daniel, and let's go into the 4th chapter, and look down at verse 34. But at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven. My reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing. But he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of earth. And no one can ward off his hand or say to him, what hast thou done? At that time, my reason returned to me. My majesty and my splendor were returned to me. For the glory of my kingdom and my counselors and my nobles began seeking me out. So I reestablished in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. Next verse. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven. For all his works are true, and his ways just. And he is able to humble those who walk in pride. That's what Nebuchadnezzar said of God. So you want to talk about God's greatness? Nebuchadnezzar, polytheistic. He saw God for who God was. He was humbled by God. And he acknowledged God's greatness. We'll look at one more. The mercy of God. Daniel 9, verse 18. O my God, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see our desolation. Now remember, while Daniel is doing all this, the nation of Judah has been carried away into captivity in Babylon, what we would now call Iraq today. And he's saying, here we are. We know we're in captivity. See our desolation, city, which is called in your name. For we do not present our supplication before you because of your righteous deeds, but because of your mercies. He's saying, you're merciful. We don't deserve your favor, but look upon us and treat us with compassion. Treat us with loving kindness. So all of this is revealed in Daniel as to who God is, as to all that God can do. And you know what? We still got quite a bit more to cover, and we'll pick it up there next week. Because Daniel goes to great lengths to show just who God is, how God relates to us, and that relatability. So we talked about his greatness, his forgiving and compassionate nature, the fact that he is eternal, the fact he is awesome, the fact that he is master over time, because he is eternal. Well, the lesson is yours this afternoon. And next week, we'll probably get done early. So we'll come out and have some discussion after the lesson like we sometimes do. But I don't want to leave the lesson this afternoon without extending the gospel invitation to any who might have a need. We did not talk about Christ, hardly at all. But Jesus is the center of it all. He died for us, paid the price. And we'd be glad to study with any who wants to know how they would put Christ on in the waters of baptism. We'd be willing to pray for any who have a spiritual need. If there's any way we can be of spiritual service, we would invite you to come while we stand and sing.